Welcome to another edition of the Practical Adjuster, a video series brought to you by FreeClaimInfo.com, a community of claim professionals. My name is Jerry Adair, and today we're going to be discussing the topic of scene investigations related to a slip and fall injury. Preparation is the key to any successful scene investigation. You should be familiar with the facts before you head to the accident location. You should have a good understanding of what the allegations are and whether there's anything our insured, the premises owner, is alleged to have done wrong, as well as what the category of the visitor is. This doesn't mean that you know everything yet, but you should have a pretty good idea of what happened and what, if anything, the insured is being blamed for. You should understand the allegations. Does someone there assert that our insured had an unsafe business, maybe a neglected floor surface, inadequate lighting, or did they fail to post a warning about something they should have? Negligence can be found in many ways, including both the commission of a negligent act as well as the omission of something proper. Without understanding what the critical information is, you'll spend way too much time doing what I call the shotgun approach. It's much better to know what the allegations are so you can limit what you have to do while you're on site. One of the first things you must determine is the category of the visitor. They will either be an invitee, a licensee, or a trespasser. If you don't understand these terms, I would suggest you review the tools and videos on FreeClaimInfo.com. This will help you to understand this critical component before you arrive at the scene. It will also help you determine what duty or lack thereof our insured owe to the injured party. Without knowing this category of the visitor, you can't really make an accurate determination. Understanding the purpose of your visit to a scene is critically important. Why are you going out there? I've had several people tell me something like, there's no need to go out there. We already know what happened, or it really doesn't matter because of X, Y, and Z, fill in the blank. Well, knowing the facts and the duty and the status of the visitor can help you come up with a plan and some parameters before you get there. You must keep an open mind, but you're there to establish if the allegations are true and not just accept the insured's version. You are there to investigate. Be an investigator. You don't just hold the insured's hand and accept what they tell you without verification. Examine the evidence, question what you see, be prepared to ask hard or intrusive questions, and ask for proof of what you're being told. Be inquisitive, or as I like to say, be nosy. You want to gather data. Get the specifics of the who, what, and where. Identify potential witnesses. Did anyone see what happened? Did anyone speak to the person before or after? A person can be a helpful witness without actually witnessing the incident itself. Did they encounter the person before or afterwards? And if so, what were their observations? What did the person say? Maybe you can learn that they were drinking alcohol before this occurred, or perhaps they were walking with a limp before this ever happened. You want to also document your findings. Has the building been altered or changed in any way in the past? And if so, what was done and by whom? Have there been any previous reports or complaints about the area of the incident? If this is the first time an incident has occurred, where and how often? Get contracts, receipts, any other evidence they have. Was the floor cleaned properly? Get the proof of regular cleaning if they have it. What about the cleaning solution? Was that the right stuff? Get photos and document the container. Make sure it was intended for that purpose. Why did the insured use it? If the inspections have been made by any government officials, get proof of that. You can have the health department, building code enforcement officer, or someone else that shows up and documents what they see. If that's helpful, we want to have it in our file. You also want to assess any breach of duty. So what duty, if any, did our insured owe to this person? If the insured is required to check the premises to ensure they are safe, which is possible depending on the status of the visitor, is there some way to prove that they did this? If it's a business, sometimes they'll keep a record. Get a copy of that. If not, find out the employee who's responsible for doing this and interview them. That can also serve as a piece of valid documentation. However, if the information the employee gives you is not good, if they're telling you that there's something they should have done that they clearly didn't do, you want to know this information, but it's not necessary for you to record their statement to document a breach of duty. It's enough for you to understand and know this to compile that in your information. I hope you've been able to help you in this area. Diagrams is certainly a critical part of the inspection as well. We're going to start with the outside. Now, I got the diagram in front of you for a building where we had an incident with a slip and fall that occurred at a fast food restaurant. You'll notice on this diagram that we have outlined the building itself. I've measured the perimeter. We've also laid out the place where the drive-through lane is, the sidewalk where the incident occurred, and the entrance to the building. We didn't document the interior of the building because none of the facts of this incident related to the inside. However, we did document the area of the fall, which you'll notice in the lower left-hand corner, there's a circle. That represents the fall location. We've measured the distance from there to the door and from the driveway. We want to give a good perspective on where things occurred and where they fit in relation to the rest of the building. Our second diagram relates to a different type of incident. This one also occurred outside, and it relates to a person who slipped and fell in an area with a walkway that had a loose or a broken tile. As in this diagram, you can see how we've documented the entrance to the facility, which is the driveway, and then the path, which goes right up the middle towards the building, which is where they would typically walk. And we then pointed out with the red circle where the incident itself, where the hazardous place was, and you can see there that it's directly in the middle of the walk path. Now, because it's so small, we blew up this area and made another place on the left-hand side where we've got the measurements of this particular area so the person reviewing it can see exactly how big this place was, or in this case, how small it was. Now, in this case, the path leads directly to the entrance to the building. It takes them directly past this hazardous area. So it documents that they were walking in the path where they should have been walking, and this hazard was in a place where it could not be expected by the visitor. In our third diagram, we also have an exterior incident where someone stepped into a hole on a porch of a building. And this person that fell in the hole or stepped into the hole was a trespasser. So our insured had no expectation of them being there. As you can see in the diagram, we've designated the place on the porch with the circle. That's where the actual hole is. We've also designated in color yellow to show them the other rotted or deteriorated areas of the porch. Now, an issue on this one was there was no permission to be on the premises, so we needed to document that the place where they fell was in such a place that a person walking down a public street wouldn't have accidentally fallen in this place without the expectation. They had to actually go onto the premises to fall. So we've measured off the place where it occurred to the street, and you can see it's 28 feet 6 inches. So it's a pretty good distance to the roadway, and that's just to demonstrate that it wasn't so close to the public road that our insured might have had obligations they really weren't aware of in relation to access by the public. We've also measured the sidewalk area. We didn't measure the building exterior. We didn't measure the interior because this had nothing to do with either of those areas. Now here we have an incident that occurred inside the pool room of a hotel. And as you can see in the diagram, we've drawn out where the pool is and also where the sauna or the spa is. And the fall occurred at a curb directly between these two places with an allegation that the floor was slippery and wet. Now, if you look at the diagram, you can see that with the area where the fall occurred in such close proximity to the spa and the pool, it would not only be expected that this area of the floor would be wet, but it would be a surprise if it weren't wet. So we've documented as much as we could about the proximity of these two places. We've documented the drain which goes around the pool and represents sort of a depression, and also a place where it should drain water off. We've measured the height of the curb that the fall occurred on. We've measured the distance from there to the pool. And this documents as best we can all the information we had on this particular incident. Now you're reviewing a diagram that we prepared based on an incident that occurred inside the dining hall of a retirement facility where an elderly person fell while they were getting food in the line. So an issue here was what were the obstructions and the witnesses. As you can see, we've designated in the diagram where the tray areas, where the food areas were. We've also designated by a circle where the fall location is. And on this one, you can see it's clearly in an area where you would have expected that person to be walking. They weren't in an unusual place. They were directly where they should have been to get their food. We've also documented the position of the likely witnesses to this incident, and that's just for the sake of showing that they would have had a clear vantage point for whatever it is that they saw happen when they give us their witness statement. Now, we've also measured the height of the salad bar, and we would have measured anything else we saw, but this is basically all the information we were able to obtain while we were at the scene on this incident. I like to start on the outside and work my way in, but you can do it in a different order. That's just my process. But if you start on the exterior, you want to lay out your diagram where you've laid out the perimeter, and whether you measure the outside of the building or not, or a parking lot, that's kind of a variable and something you can decide on your own. My theory is typically if you've got a small claim and there's a sprain or a minor abrasion or something like that going on, then you probably shouldn't spend all the time you need to measure the outside of the building and parking lots and everything else. However, if you have a serious injury such as a head trauma, a compound fracture, or something more serious like that, then it's well worth your time to measure as many things as possible. So don't cut any corners doing that. Also like to identify the route that the person took to get from wherever they started to where they ended up hurting themselves, whether it's a parking lot or inside the building. So things like the sidewalk or cart path, things of that nature, those are probably important to measure those things. It could be that the sidewalk is not wide enough for the code enforcement issues, so you want to have that information, then you can check later and see if it is wide enough or not. Room interiors are something that I almost always will measure if we're talking about an interior incident. I like to measure the room, its width, its length. Sometimes I measure the height of the ceilings depending on the nature of the incident. That has to do with your lighting issues. Whether it's a really tall ceiling, that may make a difference. I like to also diagram the adjacent rooms or the ones that they use to access this rooms, and I usually measure those as well. Now, again, there's a limit on how much you want to measure, and you need to look at the value of the claim. That'll help you decide that. The last thing I like to do in terms of measuring is, whenever possible, I like to take a photograph while I'm measuring something, such as in the photograph here, you'll see that I've looked at a curb and I'm measuring the curb with my ruler. I took a picture, so that shows those reviewing this file that curb is 6 inches in height. They don't have to take my word for it. You can do that with anything else, whether you've got a sign or an opening, any sort of opening, maybe a door opening that you want to measure, anything like that. It's always a good idea, if possible, take a picture of your measuring process just to show them that here's further documentation. I like to take my photos starting on the outside, just like I do everything else. So when your photo in the exterior of the building, I hear people say, well, the incident happened inside. Why would you photo the exterior of the building? My reasoning is I want to capture the quality or the building and the premises themselves. What kind of condition are they in? Are they nice and well maintained like the one in this photograph, with proper landscaping? The driveway has been kept clean and free of debris. And that's what I'm trying to show. You notice I step far enough back that both ends of the building are visible. This is intentional. I don't want to cut off part of the building and have someone think that I've left off something that I want to hide. So that's why I'll show the entire building. I may take more than one picture of the exterior. It just depends on the nature of the incident. I also want to make sure I capture the exterior of the building or the premises if they're in poor condition or poorly maintained. Again, we're there to assess what we're finding. We're not there to just capture the good stuff and ignore the rest. We want to know the good and the bad. If that building is in poor condition, it's been poorly maintained, then reason would tell you that probably the interior has not been that well maintained either. When I'm photographing the inside of a building, I'll go to the room where the incident took place. In this photograph, you'll see that it's a pool area or a pool room. And although the incident occurred on the far end of the pool far end of the room from where this photo was taken, I'm standing with my back against the wall as far back as I can get. And that is intentional. Just like the outside, I want to capture as much of that room as I possibly can. I don't want to leave anything off where someone might get the idea that I'm trying to hide something which is bad or reflects poorly. I want to show the entirety of the room. It is what it is. So if I need other photographs to show things up close, I'll take those as well. But I don't want those up close photographs or those taken from several feet away to replace the ones from the overview that I'm going to always take. So do both is my idea. It's important that your photographs convey the perspective that you want. In this photograph example here, I was trying to convey the angle of the walkway where this incident took place. And several photographs I took really didn't show what I wanted to show, which is that this sidewalk descends going towards the building. So I had to find a unique angle that would allow me to show what I wanted in the photograph. You may be faced with that in a number of ways. You may need shadows or sunlight or you may need less of both to get the photograph to show whatever it is, whether it's a defect in the floor or wall, whether it's a crack, whether something is unlevel, whether there's a hump or a depression in the floor or something of that nature. So take as many photographs as you need to, and I always say take more than you need, because you want to have enough photographs there when you get back to your workstation. You can examine those and ensure that you're going to have at least one that shows what you want to show. The rest, you can discard those if you don't need them, but it's better to have and not need than need and not have. Now that you've taken all those photographs that capture what you want to see or what you want to show from what you observed at the scene, it's important that you mount and label those in a way that presents what you want to the person you're reporting to. Now, I've had many people report to me and provide me with a group of photographs that were clear that they had dumped those into the software they mounted and labeled them with in the order that they took them. So you'd have one of the front, then you have one of the interior, then you'd have one of the side of the building, then you'd have one of the roof, and then so on and so forth. There was no order, and it was really kind of hard to follow what they were trying to show. Your job should not be just to give them every photograph that you can capture, no matter their purpose or reason. You're out there to take photographs, and if you've used good judgment, you've taken those photographs purposefully. So when you get ready to mount and label those, think about this. If you need the photograph, you want to include it. If you have multiple photographs and they all show the same thing, or you have one that shows what you need and the other 2 or 3 of the same thing, don't add anything extra, then don't send them. Okay. Secondly, when you put your photographs in order, use those to tell a story. Just like you start on the outside when you're doing your inspection, or if you decide to start on the inside, whatever the route you go, you want to tell the story in the same way. So I like to start with my photographs on the outside. Those from the premises overview, I take those, mount those, and label them. Then I go to the next ones in order as though I was walking from the outside into the place, down the path towards the incident area in question, and so on and so forth. So your photographs and your photo report should be able to tell a pretty clear story that goes in conjunction with the diagrams and the other pieces of information that you develop. So don't just throw those together. And more importantly, don't put your photographs in there without some sort of a description of what you're trying to convey. Not everybody can read your mind. When they look at those photographs, they may not recognize what they're actually seeing. If you get too close sometimes, you don't show proper perspective or something in the photograph, it can be easy to see a photograph and not really know what it is. So make sure that you're looking at those photo reports objectively. If you see a photograph and it's not clear, or even if it is clear, go ahead and put the obvious in there. This is a photograph of X, Y, and Z, whatever the case may be. Tell the person what they're looking at. Once they know it, then it's much easier for them to grasp the significance of that photograph versus trying to guess at what you're not telling. The last thing I want to talk about is something that you'll do before you leave the scene. That is what I call the additional investigative things that you can do. One of those is to get the history of the place. If it's a building, try to find out what that insured knows about it. How old is it? Is it 100 years old? Is it 5 years old? How long has the insured owned it? Once you establish that, then you can find out, okay, have there been any alterations or changes? Have you done anything to change the building up significantly? Maybe all they've done is put new carpet in or something of that nature. But if you don't ask such questions, you may not know that they've added a whole new room on the west end, or they've added a new front porch, and that's where this incident took place, something of that nature. If they've altered something, then clearly you want to find out what did you alter and who did it. Did a professional contractor do this job? Get documentation on that. If the insured's employee or the insured did it themselves, that's good to know. It may not be helpful to your case, but it's good to know that information. Lastly, have there been any previous incidents or complaints about the area in question? So if you have a slip and fall in a pool area, the question would be if you had anybody else slip and fall there since you've had the place. The answer is yes or no. If it's yes, when, how often, give me the details and all that kind of stuff. Maybe they haven't had any claims, but they've had some people complain about it being too slippery. If they've had that sort of complaint, what did they do about it? Did they take any steps at all? Did they ignore those complaints? That's an important piece of information, but you won't know if we don't ask those questions. Thank you for watching our video. We hope you found it to be informative. If you did, please consider liking it on YouTube. We'd also appreciate you sharing these videos with anyone you can, any way you can. For more information on this subject, please check out FreeClaimInfo.com. There you'll find blog posts, guides, and posts created for each of our videos where you can post comments, read other comments, or pose questions that someone from Free Claim Info or in our claim community can jump in and answer for you. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.